everybody, it's Craig Syracusa. Welcome to an exciting episode of Walk in Faith. Today I'm sitting down with Betty J Eadie. Betty, it's wonderful to see you again. I really appreciate this opportunity. And last week, I know we had this wonderful conversation. And I want to just thank you, first of all, especially to Peter for making this introduction. I'm extremely grateful for Peter. And I always say this, and I know you would agree, there are no coincidences at all. I know, and I'm very excited to see what God has planned. And I have to admit, and I said this the other day, I've never read your book. I wasn't familiar with your book. And I know with the combination, it sold, I think, almost 35 or 38 million copies. And I have to say, I honestly believe that this book and this generation that we are in now, they really need to read this book. I don't know how we have to get it done, but all of the schools need to read this. And this can answer the problems that society is facing now, the division. So Betty, thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Craig. It's wonderful to be here with you today.
Thank you. Now, I got to say, honestly, your life has been a miracle. I mean, you've witnessed the hand of God from the age of 5, when you had a near-death experience, from the whooping cough to your experience in heaven, which we're going to discuss in great detail. And I know you've told the story thousands of times to Oprah. And as we approach the story, I just would love for you to just take your time as you tell the story. And there's just one thing that I wanted to talk about, which I think will sort of help set up the story a little bit. When your parents were divorced, when you were a child, and you were enrolled in a Catholic boarding school, and that experience sort of established your foundation of faith and your outlook on Jesus Christ. And then in your book, you don't talk much about your childhood, but then we're sort of transported to the hysterectomy. And if you could take us from that moment and sort of tell us that story. And like I said, I really want the audience to just sit and reflect on this story the same way I did. So please, Betty J, please tell us as much as you can about that story from, was it 1972 or 71 when this took place?
1973, and I was 31. So I get it mixed up too sometimes because I was only 31 years old. But before getting into that, I'd like to talk about a little bit about my youth, and that many people wonder where I stood with God before I had the experience, which was rather interesting because I didn't have faith or trust in God. I didn't really care one way or the other. When you're young, you just don't really connect with death or the hereafter or any of that, because you feel like you are, I don't know, infallible, that there's just nothing that could happen to you ever. I was a very young girl, 4 years old actually, when I was taken and placed in a Catholic boarding school. It was while I was there that I learned to fear God, because I'm Native American and I'm half Native American, half Irish. And I was told by the nuns that I was the worst of the lot, being a sinner and as a Catholic, or not as Catholic, but as a Irish, being Irish, and a heathen because I was Native American. At the age of 4, not really understanding what that meant, it stuck in my head though. And as I grew, I thought, okay, this is what I am. I am one of God's worst, and certainly one that would go to hell. So I did have a great fear of God and a great fear of hell, and then I just let it go. I tried, because I was in the boarding schools. There was a lot of worship, a lot of service. If you screwed up in school or did something wrong, you were put in a corner. You had to read the Bible, memorize verses. And fortunately for me now, I memorized enough verses that I'm pretty astute when it comes to the Bible. I know my scriptures. Yes, that's all from all the punishment that I received. So,
I'm always impressed as a Catholic, because a lot of Catholic friends and family, we don't memorize the Bible. We really don't. All my evangelical friends, my Christian friends, they play games where they mention a passage and they turn to it in a second and they can recite the Bible. So I commend you for that.
Well, it was not just in the Catholic Church that I attended. I also attended I guess you would call them evangelical boarding schools as well. And it was there that I got the greater teaching of the Bible. So in the Catholic Church, when I would enter into the chapel, if you didn't behave good, you got bonked on the head with a ball. And I got that quite a bit. So, but anyway, that's just to cover a little bit about where I stood as in my youth, which was basically maybe a little bit rebellious, definitely free from any of the other thing. I was on my way to hell, so it didn't make any difference. It was just one of those things. Although I, at the age of 4, when I had that first near-death experience, although it wasn't lengthy, it was just a matter of dying and being held by this incredible being of light and love. And every now and then, when I was in a situation where I felt I needed some comfort, I always imagined this being.
Mm.
It wasn't until after, at the age of 31, when I went in to have the hysterectomy and then died at that time, did I realize who that man was in my youth when I was 4. So I know now a great deal more about why I had that experience at the age of 4. It was preparatory to what I would to do for him later, which was, of course, to write the book, have the experience, and write the book, Embraced by the Light, which I was sent back from heaven to do. But at the age of 31, having had 7 children up to that point, way too soon, way too early, as a young woman, I needed to have a hysterectomy. I had never been in the hospital for any surgeries or anything before that time. I was very healthy, but I had this feeling inside that when I had this surgery, things were not going to be the same. It wasn't that I was fearing dying so much, which of course I did, but it was just that this was just like one more step in my life that I didn't understand that I was undertaking, that would change me forever. And I remember telling that to my husband before I went in for the surgery. And he said, well, you're just being way too introspective.
Mm.
And you need to just, don't worry about that. You just heal and get well. During the surgery, the doctor told me later that I had hemorrhaged. They were able to repair that. And then after the recovery room sent to my regular room, it was while in there, and of all times, they were short of nurses. It was during a time when staff was very difficult for them to get. And so there was always a constant change of nurses. They didn't stay very long. They would leave shift. I don't know what the shift change was, but after being placed in my regular room, after the surgery, I woke. I was all by myself in the room, and I felt myself dying. And I can't really explain what that feels like, except for just before you die, you're going.
Mm.
And from my feet up is where I felt my legs, my feet, and it just kind of crept up. And when it got up to my chest, I was petrified. I tried to ring for the nurse, but I couldn't. I was too weak to reach for it, the buzzer. And the next thing I knew, I felt this motion in my chest. And then there was this pop, and I was up out of my body. And just like that, not a moment of lost consciousness at all. I just rose right up and I turned to look down. Now, I had worked in a hospital before, and I know the look of a person when they have passed. So I came down to take a better look at my body. And first, I didn't know that the body was mine. Well, it was kind of interesting well, you're always looking in the mirror. but you're looking at yourself from a different perspective somehow. And I wasn't sure, so I came down and I looked, and I thought, wow, she's prettier than I thought she was from that point of view. Maybe I never thought of myself as being attractive, but as I looked at the body, it appeared more attractive to me than in real life for some reason. And I knew that I had died, and I thought, oh my God, I'm dead. And there's no one here to know that. And I worried about my family. I wanted to go to them. And I was able to, I looked around in the room to find the window, which was amazing to me that I even knew that I could go through the window.
Mm.
But what it taught me, and I later learned too, that when you first die, you are not really fully back in spirit yet. It's like waking up from amnesia, but you're slowly becoming aware of the fact that you're going back, awakening to who you really truly are. And that is not the body, not the flesh, but the spirit you have always been with God. And I was able to travel to my home, and I saw my children, I saw my husband. He was sitting in a chair reading a newspaper. The kids were running up and down the steps. I looked at the clock. It was way past their bedtime. And I remember this feeling of annoyance, like, oh my gosh, I told you to put the kids to bed at a certain time. Here you are reading a newspaper. They're terrorizing. They're doing things they shouldn't do. And I thought of my children, and as I looked at each one, I could see into their lives, and I knew that each one would be good without me.
Mm.
In other words, they would grow up and they would be great people. I could see that I was okay. I also knew that they weren't really mine, that I had afforded them the body that they occupied, but that they belonged to God,
Mm.
not to me. And there was a feeling of comfort in my heart, because I could lose the ego of being totally responsible for the children and for their behaviors, for their personalities, that they actually came to this earth already developed, you might say, like adult beings or spirit beings, and they brought with them their own talents, their own intelligence, their own missions. I knew all of that in just seconds, just by looking at them. And then I went back to the hospital. I was greeted there by what appeared to be three ancient men. They looked monk-like in their attire, in that they had brown robes on, beautiful brown, not the dark, deep, but more chocolate color, and they had golden belts around their waists. There was one that had a hood pulled up, but they were very handsome in their appearance, in that they glowed, and they were beautiful. And they explained to me that they had always been with me and throughout eternities. I think that was the first time I had ever heard the word into eternities, that they had existed with me all this time, and that they were there to help me through my passing, but that my death was premature.
Mm.
And that's all they explained. And then there was this sound of music and of tinkling sounds, beautiful sounds, that filled the room, and there was an opening, and I began to travel through that opening, and it was comfortable, it was beautiful, and it was like a tunnel effect. And in that tunnel, there were other beings that were at a distance, animals even, in this tunnel, all going in, not in the same direction, but yet again in the direction that I was. But they were not interfering with my travel or my movement or where I was going. And so I didn't feel, on earth, I am somewhat claustrophobic. I never felt a bit of claustrophobia, or their nearness didn't bother me in this tunnel. I ended up in the blackest space that was pitch dark. And again, because of claustrophobia, I would not have been able to stand being in this space. But it was like being bathed in love, liquid love. And I felt wonderful. The joy of being in this space was not only amazing because I could exist in it, but because it was love. Love, just love and warmth and beauty. But yet I couldn't see anything. And as I basked in this love, and I don't know for how long that was, then there was this piercing bright light that suddenly showed up, and it was looking like a searchlight, very bright, very intensely bright, white. And then it rested on me. And as it rested on me, it broadened. It just spread out to encompass me and drew me to it. And as it drew me to it, and I was eager to go because it was even greater love than what I was experiencing. And it just drew me right into it. And I traveled in this beautiful white light, pure white, brilliant white. You couldn't look at that in your human body and exist. You just couldn't. And I saw that at the end of that tunnel of light, there was a being that was there, standing there at the end of it. And light was coming and flowing from him. And it was love, and more than love, the purity. And as I got closer, his arms spread out like this. And as he spread out, a golden halo went around him and spread out to me. And I rushed to him because I knew who he was. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, Betty, we spoke the other day too about, and I just want to sort of bring that up is, I think about my grandfather all the time, and I think about, just sort of the tangible things that he left me, and it's always the touch, the hand, and whenever I want to sort of transport or be transported back to that time when he was alive, I think about that. When you want to, or when you think about this story or tell this story and think about that moment when you met Jesus, what does it feel like? Are you able to sort of feel that hug again, or the light, or that presence of love? Can you explain that experience?
I don't think I can ever talk about him without being brought to tears of yearning for him. It's more of a feeling of loss. It's a feeling of the love that I felt from him, and missing him, like you said, like a grandfather or a parent that you just can't wait to be with them again. And and it just overcomes me all the time. And I try to get past it, but I'm afraid it doesn't. It's not going to work. It just isn't going to work. I do miss him, and I miss the time. Excuse me, the time that I had with him, and I knew who he was. And as I neared him, I knew he was Jesus. And I knew that I had always known him, always. And I ran into his arms. And this is why I titled my book, Embraced by the Light. I ran into his arms and he held me. And as he held me, I felt him chuckle, sort of like well, you're back, everything's fine. And he just held me and I could just feel him vibrate, his chuckle. And I said, I never, ever, ever want to leave you again, ever. And I said, why did you make me go there? Why? I said, you don't know the hell I've been through. And he says, I know. And I says, why? He said, because it shaped you the way I needed you to be shaped. Everything you experience has prepared you for who you are today. And I says, I didn't know that when I was going through all the lessons.
Wow.
He said, but you needed to do that. I said, but I'm Native American and I'm Irish. He said, perfect.
Wow.
Perfect for you. He
Did
said, you needed that. Yeah.
you said so many things, but the one thing like you said, you knew him. You had that feeling where you always knew Jesus, you always
Oh,
knew God. Did
yes.
you feel like in that moment that, a lot of us have this persona, we live above the surface, and I can, pretend to be somebody that I'm not, right? But did you feel like he knew who you were? He knew your soul. He knew everything about you. There was no the Betty that we see on Monday and the Betty we see on Tuesday. He knew you. He knew exactly who you were, what type of person, your motives. Did you feel that at all? That you could be honest with Jesus?
Absolutely. He knew everything about me. He said he did. And I knew he did. And he said I was perfect, just the way that I am. And and I was asking him all these questions, and he was amused. And I said, well, where's the nail prints in your hands? How come, he said, you don't need to see my pain to know who I am. And that did something inside of me. I didn't need to see the pain that he suffered to know who he was. And I said, is that true for everyone? He said, no. He says, I can appear any way to get their acceptance. He said, you accept me just as I am. I accept you just as you are.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. Well, that really humbles a person and puts a responsibility, because I never thought of myself as being accepting of Jesus or God or anyone, to be honest. And so I thought it must be in me for him to see that. But when you become a wounded soul, when you have experiences that mutate that part of you, it doesn't mean that part isn't in you still. It is. And it will awaken when you get closer to God. And he will awaken you to who you truly are. Because as we enter the earth, we become mutated by our parents, their thoughts of who we are, the kids at school, our teachers. And Jesus explained it to me this way. He said, it's like being an empty vessel. And you're empty at birth, except for the beautiful vessel that you are. And then your parents pour whatever they are into you. Your teachers, people that you trust, people that you admire, the things that you see that you want, it fills up your vessel. Pretty soon you don't know really who you are. You're a sum total of all that you allowed to shape who you are. And to rid yourself of that, pour it out. Be done with it. Pour it out. It's not you. Go back to who you are by connecting to God he'll bring that to you in a great way.
I love that.
I
Love it. I love
We're
that.
Christ. I mean, that's what he said. You just
And so many things. I mean, first of all, just the thing that I loved, right, about just the story, right, when you got there, right, and let's take the fact that, like you said about an empty vessel, how we're influenced, our truth, society, what happiness, fulfillment is, all of that, and how we're overwhelmed. When you got to heaven, you had nothing, right? God didn't care about your accolades, about all your likes, your friends, your followers, the money. It means nothing. It means nothing in heaven, right? It means nothing with a relationship with Christ. And I think that is one of the keys that, and it could be the enemy, it could be Satan, it could be society that's influencing us to sort of separate from the relationship with Christ, is materialism, right? So we have that aspect. We're influenced by so many people, and the unconditional love that you felt, those are the things that could heal this world. We're sitting there talking about unity, and we all need to, I love you as my brother and sister in Christ, but we're forgetting the key components, the unconditional love and the influence that we get from people that are bringing us further away from Christ. And you've experienced that. And that's why I really think this book, if we can get this in the hands of everyone and they read this and they listen to your story, those are the things that could really bring us together and bring us back to where we need to be.
absolutely. And you know what? God knows that. And when I was told that I needed to come back, I didn't want to come back, of course. And I told Jesus, I must have been pretty familiar. We were familiar with each other because I could say this and get away with it. I said, I'm not going back, and nobody's going to make me. And I thought, I think of that, and I'm rather embarrassed that I said it. But on the other hand, it gave me a greater insight to just how wonderful Jesus is, just how wonderful God is. It just, I mean, he was amused by that rather than angered.
Mm.
And, but I went on to experience some wonderful things there. I prefer probably to leave it to the reader to catch up with
I
a lot.
agree. I agree. The garden itself, it's funny. You said something in the book, and I always try to, like, I ask my son who's 5 questions all the time, and I don't know if he likes it, he doesn't, but I'm always asking him questions. And I said to him the other day, because you said in the book, and I don't want to give away too much about picking your parents, and I said, Mario, he's 5. I said, did you pick mommy and daddy? And he said, Daddy, no, I just picked mommy. And you proposed to her. I said, what? He's like, I was in heaven and I picked mommy. But the thing, and I didn't tell him about the book, and he says things, and and it's not just my son. I think we all have the ability to really tap into that. And you talk about telepathy, and I've read about that too. We have the ability to communicate. But he says certain things, even in your book, and I'm going to give it away again. He talks about butterflies, right? And my family, wherever we see a butterfly after someone passes away, right away we say, okay, that's the communication. I never said this to my son. He bought an angel for my wife for Mother's Day, and there was a red bird on it, and he wanted to buy it. And the next day a bird appeared, and I didn't think anything of it. And he said, that's a sign from God. He's 5. And I said, how does he know that? And there's certain things that if we really talk to our children about it, they know a lot more than we think. And reading your book and then asking him questions. He didn't read the book. He said things that sort of validated what you said. And I asked him about, Eden. I'm very curious about Eden. And he said that he was in a garden. And I said, how would he know this? And I said, well, what's the garden called? And he said, God's garden. It's a simple term. And I said, what did it look like? And he started explaining it. And I'm like, how do they know this? It's just so fascinating. That's why I don't believe in coincidences at all. When I read your book, I was fascinated, but there are a couple of more questions because I know we could talk for hours because I have thousands of questions, which I would have asked. What was time like? I know time in heaven, based on what I've read, obviously God experiences it very differently. Were you able to experience time? Did you know how much time was passing?
No, not at all. And people often ask, how long do I think I was dead? Well, I know when I looked at the clock, it was 9:30. The next time I looked at the clock, it was like 2 in the morning. And so, but sometime between all of that, I experienced years of knowledge in heaven, years of knowledge. And much of which they said they'd have to take from my memory. I couldn't bring that back and exist here on this earth.
Mm.
So a lot of it was removed, sadly. But as time went on, they said, Jesus said, as time goes on, if I need it, it'll come to me.
Mm.
And it has over time. I remember this or I remember that or whatever. I'm instructed this way or that way. It's given to me. And so, I mean, it's that was back in 1973. Since that time, my life changed tremendously. I mean, how could it not?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Can't imagine. I can't imagine.
But I was told that when I returned, that I would have to be given an extra dose of humanness in order to exist here on earth, because I had had too much extra spirituality. I'd learned about, so much about the spirit. So I haven't quite figured out what all that is, but I am able to navigate here on earth, except for the fact that this is my life. I mean, it is what I do. It's awakening people. And Jesus said, I says, how on earth am I can't go back and share this? How on earth am I going to share it? People are not going to understand. They're not going to understand that there's no hell,
Mm.
not the way that we are teaching it. The hell we go through is what we create here on earth. Like right now, we're going through a form of hell, and it is hell. And but that horrible burning, he said this, his exact words, Craig, and that is, if you as a good mother wouldn't take one of your children and throw them, no matter what they did, and throw them into a lake of fire or into outer darkness where you'd never see them again, if you couldn't do that, how much greater is God's love than yours?
Mm.
How much greater? I had just now experienced his great love. And I could tell you what, there's no love compared to that, to what he has. There's no amount of forgiveness that could compare to his forgiveness. We talk about terms of grace. Grace is a form of forgiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're forgiven before we even do it. So I don't even know where grace comes in. I can't even really discuss that subject very well. And I try to, as I talk about this, I try, you can't wound anyone in their religion, their faith. And because each one of us came here to this earth at a different level of spiritual development. And each one of us have our own level of understanding and capabilities. And so the different faiths actually is where our leanings are. And if we develop spiritually in that particular faith, then it's good. But he said the way to know whether the faith is right or wrong is if it is about love,
Mm.
about God. If there is no love in there, it has nothing to do with God. Nothing. And void a church without love. And if they teach to harm anyone else in their religion, like putting down someone's religion to escalate their own, that's not love. And so people often ask me, well, what church should I belong? You go look for the love.
Mm.
And if your spirit connects with the love in that faith, then stay there until you grow more love and you see that, wait a minute, this isn't enough love.
Yes.
You don't have to stay in a faith. You go to a faith to where you are with like-minded people to worship God in the way in which they're doing it. Everyone has their different ways. And you can establish their ways. You can use their ways. I did that once when I was in New York, and they asked me if I would come to the church or to the hospital and pray for some people who were ill. And I said I would. And I went. These were men dying of AIDS back when the AIDS was so strong. And I went in and I asked the person, they just opened the door, put me in, and shut the door behind me. I walked over to the man that was laying there, and I explained who I was. And I said, would you like me to pray for you? And he says, yes. I prayed for him, and I left, and he had a peculiar look on his face when I left. So I asked the person who sent for me, I said, I don't know that I'm not feeling effective. He said, well, this is a Catholic hospital. I said, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So in the next room, I prayed, I did the sign of the cross, I did all the stuff that is expected of the church. Everyone from there on thanked me, and they felt blessed. But that was because I knew from the teachings in heaven when I died that imagination is key to reality. So if you can imagine that a certain sign or a certain behavior or certain words are healing, it is a reality. Just like curse words. If you were to curse in English, someone who doesn't speak English doesn't know, and they're not affected.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So we use words that we know that will be effective. And so that's what I've done from then on. And so when I read the scriptures or whatever, I look for words that are effective. And I'll tell you what, if they don't have love in them, I can't believe it.
Wow.
I can't. It's just not there for me, because God is pure love. Pure love. And so that's what they sent me back to tell.
Wow. It's an amazing story. Now, in the past, this has been since 73. Have you experienced anything since then? So, I mean, because there's got to be times, well, maybe not. I know for me, though, when I discern something and, okay, this is what God wants me to do, there are times where I doubt myself. Is this really what I heard or experienced? Has there ever been times where you've seen signs that sort of reaffirmed it or validated the mission and what you're continuously doing?
All the time. All the time. I mean, I keep that connection open. I pray for it to remain open. I mean, that is like a daily prayer. Father, I'm here. You gave me my life back to serve you, and keep that direction, that communication, keep that open between us, so that I can have the confidence and to just continue to go forward no matter what. And he does direct me in a lot of ways. A very simple way, you mentioned Oprah. I remember way back when I was 31 when I died, and then I was 50 when I got on Oprah. So there's this space of time there. But I didn't know who Oprah was. I don't watch a lot of television. I never have. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know who Phil Donahue was. I just never watched them. So when my publisher called and said Oprah wanted me on, I called my sister, who watches everything. And I said, Oprah wants me on. She goes, oh, that's awesome, awesome. Well, at the same time, the publisher got a call from Phil Donahue. And so I called my sister and I says, and Phil Donahue. And she says, no, don't go on Phil Donahue's show. I says, why? She said, because Oprah won't have you on hers. They were.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I told the publisher, I'll go on Oprah's, but I will not go on Phil Donahue. They got really upset. You know, it's really big. I says, I'm sorry. Well, where are you getting your information from? I said, my sister, and I trust.
It is funny though, right? If you go on one, you can't go on the other. It's so ridiculous.
So I went on Oprah, and the first thing they asked me was, have you been on Phil Donahue before they put me on? I said, no. Okay, you're good. And I thought, my sister knew.
No, that I know that is true. So let me ask you, just because I know I want to wrap this up, because we could talk all day. Is this a common story? I mean, you know, have you met anyone? I mean, I know thousands of people have written to you, and 30, 40 million copies have been sold. So I know this is part of God's plan. I think we've established that. But is this common? Or did you ever ask yourself, why me? I mean, I know people, believe it or not, have interviewed other people that have passed, and whether they transitioned or not, but not similar experiences as your story. Have you met anyone that's had a similar story?
Yes, I have. I've met some very fascinating people because of Embraced by Light. But I was told that God had prepared those in advance who would listen. He has already touched their hearts to be open in the right time. So I've had people read the book and say they thought it was trash, threw it away or whatever, and then years later write me and say, I was so wrong. I went and I got the book. My life has changed. It led me back to your book, and I read it, and now I understand it. And so I get a lot of that. I mean, that is amazing. Of course, the most amazing part to me is God opens up doorways and paths. He said he would touch the hearts that would awaken. He used the word awaken. That he would awaken the people that he has already preset in the path to help with Embraced by Light. My publisher was pre-selected by God, and they actually established a publishing company to create Embraced by Light. It was their first book because it was a brand new publishing house.
Oh my God!
I know, and God let me see the cover of the book, the front and the back, and said, this is the way the book was to be.
Unbelievable.
When I laid in bed, writing Embrace, the words were given to me. Have you seen the Matrix, how the words?
Yes.
Well, mine went this way. But I laid there in bed, frozen, watching the words. Embraced by Light was supposed to be a certain font size. We did the font size that the Lord told me about. And so at first the publishing company was kind of leery about it all. You know, they thought, how could she know? I didn't know what a font was at 31. I just wasn't that experienced. But I knew when I saw it. And so anyway, all of these things were given to me. And I knew that Embraced by Light was going to cover the globe. I knew all of that. That was told me, but it wasn't my place to worry about that. God had already prepared it all.
Wow. So now
Yeah.
what's next for you? I mean, 38 million copies, 40 million. I mean, what's next? I mean, do you feel like you've accomplished your mission? I know, or do you feel like there is still more for you to do?
No, I currently am working towards getting the movie done. This actually started years back, but they weren't the people that God had awakened. But what happened instead was to achieve the knowledge that I needed to understand the process.
Mm.
And so, and the reason I say the people that God did not select, because most of the people in these, I won't mention names, but everyone would know them in Hollywood, the producers, the directors, they're high-end top names. One wanted to change me dying, wanted me to get killed on a motorcycle. Imagine that. Others had other ideas. They just didn't like the idea of me dying in a simple hospital with having had a hysterectomy.
Mm.
If one thing in my mind, and I'll stick to it until the day I die, if one thing is changed or made up, then I wouldn't, as a viewer, believe anything.
Yes.
I want it pure. I want it honest. I want it just the way Betty experienced it. Not a thing changed. And that's what I stick to. And so it's been a process, but we right now, my son Jeff is working with Ridley Scott Company, and we are going to produce the movie, and we're just. But again, I have this. It must be done in a certain way.
Mm. I agree. I agree.
We're kind of sticking to that, but is it going to be done? It's going to be done. God will open the way. He will ignite the people who are going to be involved. And I trust that more than anything in the world. Anything in the world. And so I feel very confident and I'm excited about it.
I mean, I completely agree with you. And I think honestly, maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't know. The story would still is going to be successful. We know that, right? But I think this time now, honestly, I think this season that we're all in, I've noticed it from beginning of COVID to now, we all need to really get to the heart of our faith and to really build that foundation of faith, because so many things you mentioned in the book about the lack of family units and parents and just the faith element itself is not as sort of, it's not instilled in our children the same way it was when I was a kid, when you were a kid. So it's something that we all needed. And I really believe this book, the elements in this book and the movie, as long as it stays true to this book, which it will, I really think it could beyond bring people to Christ, but really transform hearts. Because just reading this now, and this happened in 1973, I'm reading this going, oh my God, there are things in here that we could all learn from, things that I could adjust and reflect on. And I think this is the perfect season. And having Ridley Scott, your son, and Peter, everyone involved, and I would be more than happy to help you in any way possible. I really believe that when this book comes out, this movie comes out, it will really transform a lot of people's lives. They really do. I mean, people need to read it if they haven't read it. I really need to pick up a copy of this book.
Right. And with the world the way it is, as you just mentioned, people need hope. They need to know that, in my mind, there's no greater study than that of the afterlife. We need to know where we're going. We need to know where our loved ones have gone. And when they've passed, especially again with COVID and so many people just taken off this world, just like that. And so we need to know that. But God knew that. See, that's the amazing thing. This was preparatory to all of our losses, and not to fear death, but to know that there is life after death with Him. And then to learn that we will take with us the godlike attributes that we acquire. And our spirits will have grown that little bit more than they came here as, having acquired.
Wow.
And so that's our goal. And that is to acquire the attributes of God. Nothing else on earth, not money, not possessions, not this, not that, not the other. We take none of that with us. We take our attributes of God. And this is why we need to love one another. We need to support, help. We need acts of kindness. All of that is what is going to increase the growth of our spirit when we return to Him.
I love that. Those are words to live by. And I always talk about this before we wrap is really what's beneath the surface. Like what motivates us, right? Really, why do we do certain things? And I always talk about before I do anything, I really want to know why. Why am I motivated to do this? Am I doing it out of love or am I doing it for selfish reasons? And when you start to really think about your own motives, and if they're not in line with Christ and God's teaching, I don't do it. And when I start to live my life that way, things are a lot clearer, a lot easier. And I'll tell you, and I know for you as well, when I started to build a relationship, not just go to church and I know God, a real relationship with Christ, my life has transformed, has changed. Opportunities come, things, you meet people, life is just, it's just filled of joy and happiness, clarity. It's really an amazing, it's just, it's something that I do every day is just, and it's not about like, I feel like I brought someone to Christ. It's just that I want people to experience the same way you do, the joy that I feel. And it's easy. It's just by building a relationship with Christ on a daily basis. And that's my mission. And that's why I do what I do, is because I want someone else to just experience what I experience. And I would, and like what you experience, it's just these unconditional love.
Oh, absolutely. You've got to share it. If you have it inside of you, you share it, you receive more. And Jesus showed me that by saying, when you leave yourself open to God, you receive the blessings and the gifts. It's only after you pass it on that you leave your hand open or yourself open to receive more.
Wow.
But you have to share it. You have to pass it. And so all the gifts that God has blessed me with, the knowledge that He's given me, there's not a day that goes by that I don't share it with others. Because what good is it?
Mm-hmm.
Being a hoarder, right? You bottle it up, you hoard it until it rots.
Mm-hmm.
So this way you just go ahead and pass it on.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who have been wounded by religion, who do not go to church, church is with any group of people you want. It could be your family, because we have God within us. And if you have Him here, that is your church. Church. It's just that going to church is good to be where you're with like-minded people, where you feel like you're not alone. But do you have to be there? We forget what church is.
Mm.
And so, and that is where, in the Bible it says, where two or more are gathered together in my name. That's church. So don't feel guilty not going, although I always suggest that if you're low in spirit, then gather with like-minded people in church of your, yeah.
Amen to that. Betty, thank you. This has been enlightening. I could seriously talk to you. I have, pages of questions. I could talk to you all day. But Betty, if people want to, whether it's donate, get involved, help with the film, get more information, can you share whether it's a handle for social media or a website? What is your social media platforms, or if it's a website that they can contact you?
There's a website. It's called Embraced by Light, the movie. They can Google that, and they will be in contact with my son, Jeff, who's in charge of all of that. And if they get lost trying to find that, they can, email me at betty@embracedbylight.com.
I don't think, once you put in the old Google machine and you put this book in there, there's so many links. I mean, this isn't a book that was just written yesterday. There are millions and millions of people that have read this and have been transformed and changed. Betty, it's honestly been a pleasure. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Peter, for this introduction. And Betty, I look forward to helping you in any way possible.
Thank you.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Walk in Faith. Please, connect with Betty J Eadie. Read the book. I would advise you read the book. I don't know if this is the cover she was referring to, but this is the book. I read it. I didn't put it down. Please contact her for more information, or contact me. Always remember, guys, you have the ability to inspire and evangelize through words and actions. God bless you.